Okay. So welcome everyone. Really excited to have Andrei here, and turn it over to you, Andrei.
Thank you. Yeah, super excited to talk about all things AI, ML, LLM, and of course Ruby with you all today. Okay, let me just figure out how to share my screen real quick. Screen. Okay. Are you guys able to see it? Okay. Sorry, I've kind of switched up my monitors here, so I'm kind of getting used to the setup. All right, so let's dive right in. So today I'm gonna talk about Langchain.rb. A little bit about me. I've been professionally building software for a little over 12 years. Built software for a bunch of different companies, venture-backed startups, Y Combinator companies, etc. I've been running a small software development firm since 2017 called Source Labs. We're a small team building custom software for small, medium-sized enterprises, and on various client projects, depending on the company size. I serve somewhere between being an architect, engineer, manager, or a fractional CTO. And some of the background, I've built a fair amount of kind of traditional keyword search applications. And as the AI wave, hype wave started rolling in, I wanted to dive into different vector search capabilities. I discovered the original Python Langchain implementation, and I thought, well, how come Ruby is so far behind? We ought to have an answer, a solution in the Ruby ecosystem as well. So I started working on Langchain.rb. Some of the vanity metrics, there's 400 stars in the repo. There's 25 growing number of contributors, 7,000 downloads. We have a small Discord community. And what is Langchain.rb? Langchain.rb is an orchestration layer for building LLM-powered applications. So I borrowed this enterprisey looking diagram from A16Z blog, but it talks about emerging architectures for LLM applications, and you could see that in the middle you see an orchestration layer. So they mentioned Python or do-it-yourself, LangChain, Llama Index, ChatGPT, and it strings a lot of different services together. So why Ruby? And I'll bring your attention to this diagram in the bottom right corner first. This is from another blog post called "The Rise of AI Engineer," and there's a link there. But basically, the kind of premise is that there's a lot of folks on the left that have been doing traditional machine learning, data science, kind of academic research background. There's full stack engineers on the right hand side on the x-axis. And a lot of them are going to be shifting towards this AI engineer, towards this API boundary. They're going to have to start getting a lot more familiar with AI, ML, LLM concepts in order to string different systems and add those capabilities to existing products. So a lot of product managers are coming to their engineering leads, engineering leaders right now and asking, well, where are these capabilities? Like, what can you do for me? What can we build out into our products? Or what kind of initiatives can we spin up? So again, why Ruby? Ruby's not going anywhere. As I mentioned, there's a ongoing rapid pivot to AI engineering. Ruby is very similar to Python. It's written in C. They're similar syntax. It has a lot of similar problems, kind of same types of concurrency problems, for example. I really like the Ruby ecosystem and how we exercise a very healthy level of pragmatism. I find that the applications we built and how we approach problems is rooted in a lot of pragmatism. We tend to not reinvent the wheel. I mean, the whole phrase kind of bears a gem for that. Follows the community pretty closely. Also, I find that a lot of really good Ruby developers are also kind of great, possess a lot of really good software development fundamentals. So we tend to write really good OOP code, as opposed to folks coming from the academic research background. My personal experience is that doesn't always seem to be the case. And also, monoliths are back in fashion. I think in this environment of kind of economic contraction, where companies have been evaluating their costs, looking at their staff, what they're spending on hosting, the complexity that they take on by using serverless or microservices architectures. I think monoliths are kind of gaining momentum again. And this is an image of a monolith somewhere in Iceland. So some of the use cases that Langchain.rb targets are semantic search, vector search, QA over proprietary documents, chatbots, and also agents. And there, I put experimental in parentheses, and we'll talk about all of these. Langchain.rb also offers a tool set. So we've got prompt management, so being able to generate kind of version, create, save prompts, output parsing. So for example, being able to request a specific data format to come back from a large language model. So for example, we have a JSON output parser, so you can provide a JSON specification, and we make sure that whatever the response that comes back from a large language model adheres to that. Every large language model has context window limitation. So we have context length validators to make sure that you don't exceed it. There's data chunking, which is important when you're splitting data before it gets indexed into vector search databases. File imports, chat conversation memory, so being able to save a chat conversation and revisiting it later in time. There's agent tools, I'll talk about it, and also deeper active record integration. So what is vector search? So vector search is a way to find related objects that have similar characteristics using machine learning models that detect semantic relationships between objects in an index. So when data is indexed in a vector search database, we use an LLM to generate embeddings. So a word embedding is a vector or an array of float numbers or coordinates that represent properties of that word. And when you talk about an embedding dimension, it's basically vector size. So it's the size of that array. And you can see at the bottom, there's an example, which is just an array of float numbers. And so it varies. What the dimension is varies based on the large language model that you use. Some of them are in the thousands. But for the sake of visualizing, so if you look at the diagram in the bottom right corner, if we only had a two-dimensional vector, so there were only two properties, you could see that these words are kind of rearranged based on their semantic meaning. So sentence embeddings is a similar concept, but generating these vectors for whole sentences. And again, for a two-dimensional vector size, you could see that the cluster in the top left corner, the greetings, the admiration for one's dog, or the topic of soccer are all clustered together. So this is what this is our vector search LLM matrix. So basically what we're saying is that you could take any large language model, any kind of provider, and pair it with any vector search database. So what are some of the benefits of using it? So it's so we offer a common DSL, common APIs. Because of that, you have interoperability, so you can use the different systems as I've just shown in the matrix. There's a reduced vendor lock-in because of it. So if you want to swap out to a cheaper LLM down the road, you can, or if you want to switch away from a cloud vector search option to cloud vector search solution to a self-hosted one, you can. So we've got optionality, and we're also baking in a good Rails spirit, kind of best practices, how we think LLM powered applications should be built. So so in order to kind of dive right into some technical details here, so you would instantiate an LLM provider. So this could be OpenAI, this could be Cohere, this could be Google Palm. I'm really looking forward to trying out the Claude 2 model as well that just came out from Anthropic. Then you would instantiate the vector search client. So again, this could be Chroma, Qdrant, Weaviate, Pinecone. They all have a very similar interface, a very similar method signature, initialization signature. You can index some data by just passing it large text and corresponding IDs. Or you can also point it to your files, and we will parse those files, kind of clean them up and index them into a vector search database. So if you want to skip all of that and you're working within a Rails environment, some of you probably have seen and worked with Elasticsearch and used SearchKick. So a very similar concept where you would just declare a vector search on this active record model. You would specify the provider that you're using and initialize it and set up the callbacks. And once that's completed and you have some data in your vector search index, you can either execute the similarity search or do kind of QA style querying. And I'm going to show a video here. I just want to check, can everyone see this video? Okay, thank you. So you can see we're instantiating the Weaviate client, specifying the URL, the API key, the index name, the organizational documents, and the LLM that we're going to be using, which is going to be the OpenAI. And I'm just going to fast forward through some things. You can get started really easily, really quickly by creating a default schema. And we have this method available for all of the vector search databases as well. So once you create the default schema, you could start importing some data in. And I actually ran this example locally and recorded this. So what I'm doing here is I'm importing a benefits brochure from a company I used to work way back in 2014. It's a PDF file. And once it's in there, I can now ask it some questions. So for example, you could see I'm asking, what is the company's vacation policy? How much time can I take off? There's an answer. What are all of the benefits offered? The benefits offered include medical, dental, vision, life, short-term, long-term disability. Tell me about the parking benefits. Tell me about the 401k benefits. What are the dental plans? How much do the dental plans cost? Sorry, I'm just going to skip that. Yeah, so when we're doing QA style querying, this is the prompt that we're actually using. So we're finding the closest matches in the vector search database that are closest to the question, the user's question or the query passed in. We're packaging it up in a context and sending it along with a question to an LLM. So let's talk about chatbots. So generally, I think of chatbots as some sort of as a specific type of interface into a service and or a data set. So you would typically use chatbots when you're trying to improve the UI or increase the engagement into your system, or guide the user through information retrieval or information collection, or any kind of other business process automation tasks. And I'm going to show this tiny script / project that one of the contributors has created, and he basically got two large language models, in this case Google Palm and OpenAI, kind of debating with each other. And you can use any of the other LLMs that we support. And I'll show a quick demo that I was running locally. So here I'm asking them to talk through the idea of universal basic income. You could get it to debate out much spicier topics. So Google's Palm 2 starts out with, I'm an AI model. I would like to discuss the next topic with you, universal basic income. OpenAI happily jumps on board, and they go at it. I find that they tend to be extremely cordial, not very combative. So next thing is I wanted to talk about our agents. And agents are kind of experimental. I think my personal opinion is, in order, AI agents, my personal opinion is, in order to get them to work, you have to put a lot of boundaries, a lot of constraints, and to make sure that they're resilient and don't just crash the system. But AI agents are autonomous general purpose LLM-powered programs. There's a lot of constantly emergent research that's coming out. There's chain of thought, tree of thought, reasoning plus act, react techniques. They could be used to automate workflows or execute complex multi-step tasks. They work much better with powerful LLMs. And they're generally driven by carefully crafted engineered prompts. They can also use tools, and tools are, think of tools as API wrappers. It's very similar to what OpenAI offers with their plugins. So a subset of the different tools that we offer, and it's really easy to add your own and extend, are the calculator, the Wikipedia API, the Google Search API, the Weather API, the Ruby code interpreter, and being able to connect your own database. I wanted to show how our Langchain React agent actually works. So there's some instructions at the top where we tell it how to use how to use tools and inject a list of tools available to it. So we stated the list of tool names and a short description of when those tools can be invoked and how they can be used. And then we instructed to use the following format, which is basically a thought, action, input, observation pairing. So as an LLM breaks down a problem, it has these thoughts where in some instances, in order to accomplish what the user is asking me for, I need to use an available tool to me. And so it would say action, I'm going to use a search tool. Action input will be the actual input that we would then pass it to that tool and execute on its behalf and pass it back as an observation to the LLM. So let's take a look at the React agent in action. So we're instantiating the Weather tool, the Ruby code interpreter tool, the Google search tool, the calculator tool, and we're going to use the OpenAI for this. But again, you can use any kind of other supported LLM. And let's see. So here I'm asking it to find the current weather in Boston, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C. and take an average. And so it starts out having a, oops, I'm sorry, I think I skipped it. Yeah, so you could see that it decided that it needs to find out the weather in Boston, Massachusetts, and it's going to use the weather tool for that. Then it's going to find the current weather in Washington, D.C. It's going to use the weather tool for that. Then it's going to use the calculator to split down the middle. You can see the answer is 84. I ran this yesterday. The next question that I asked it was, what is the current ruble to USD exchange rate? And it decided to execute the Google search for ruble USD exchange rate. We execute that query on the LLM's behalf. We then send it back as an observation to it to synthesize an answer. And then lastly, I asked it to use a Ruby program to output the sum of Fibonacci sequence for 1 through 1000 and not to define any Ruby methods. So it generates this inline script where it iterates over that range and arrives at the answer. So next thing, I wanted to show this SQL query agent. And I think this is really exciting for the whole kind of data analytics space. I can't count on the I can't count the number of times that I've had businessy folks ask for a specific to take a look at the database and run some queries in order to provide certain kind of metrics for them. So I think if someone created a platform in order to be able to do this, it would empower them greatly. So yeah, so let me walk through this. So you could see that I'm instantiating the database tool and I'm passing a database, a Postgres database that I'm running locally. Again, we're using the OpenAI LLM. We're instantiating the SQL query agent. And I'm then asking it how many users are there. It decides to use the database tool. It generates a query, select count star from users. We execute that query on the user's behalf. or I'm sorry, on the LLM's behalf, we pass back the results to the LLM, and it uses that to generate the answer. The next query we're asking it is how many users have completed all 4 courses, and this is actually a database for an e-learning platform. You could see that, again, it decides to use the database tool, and it passes a query, select count star from users. It does an inner join on certificates, where certificates complete equals true. So anytime a user completes a course, we create a certificate. And you could see that, yeah, it generates an answer. 160 users have completed all 4 courses. Okay, let's keep going. So what's next for Langchain.rb? So we want to make sure that what we're building is rooted in real world use cases, helps achieve real business objectives. So we're always trying to collect feedback. We want to make sure we're building the right things. We'd like to sharpen up a lot of the full end-to-end workflows. So from the point where you do bundle install to having a production grade system, or basically a fully functioning POC. Some of the features we'd like to add are observability, analytics, deeper integration with Rails, of course, expanding into adjacent areas, and going kind of both deeper and also adding more breadth to a project, the caching layer. There's a couple articles that I've dropped in here that I think are really good reads on the subject, and that's it. And you could find these. You could see the QR codes, one for our Discord and one that will link you back to these slides. Thank you. Any questions?
That was fabulous. Thank you. That was this has really lit a fire under me in terms of wanting to just dig into Langchain.rb. I'll kick off the questions with something stupid because I'm just trying to get into this space. So in the demo, I had a little trouble seeing the screen at first until I got my face more in front of the videos. The process by which it chooses which tool to use, could you just maybe re-summarize that, or how that works again, like in those examples that you were showing?
Yeah, 1 second. So I would definitely read through this whole prompt, but we're basically telling it exactly that. So answer the following questions as best you can, and you have access to the following tool. And this is actually exactly how, well, this is very similar to how OpenAI plugins work. In order to create an OpenAI plugin, you give it a JSON, which points back to your API endpoint and provides a description on when that API could be invoked, right? So, the reasoning capabilities within large language models help it inform when those different tools would be useful, right? And so this is the kind of the format of the original prompt that would be sent on the initial request to an LLM. So we end this prompt with thought : right, to trigger a completion by an LLM. So then it would go step by step. It would attempt to go step by step to fulfill the user's question, to answer a user's question, right? So it will generate a thought that, in order to answer your question, I need to execute a Google search. It will output action : search action input the query for the Google search that needs to be executed. And we then, within the code within Langchain, we then match that action, right? So we're just doing regex, plain regex for that action : action input. We then use that tool and call and just basically execute a plain Google search, right? And then take back the results, send the string back as an observation as a result of executing that action back to the LLM, append all of his results to the bottom of his prompt, and then send it back to the LLM as the following request. Does that make sense?
The one part, it's still a little fuzzy to me, is the selection of search versus calculator is done by the context of the question.
It's done by the LLM itself.
And the LLM is doing that based on
its
those
reasoning,
embedded, which comes from those, what are they called? The embeddings. Like, so it takes the question and converts it into its embeddings and somehow tries to match that against.
So not quite. Vector search databases are actually not involved in this process at all.
Okay.
In the agents.
So this is what differentiates one implementation from another. How this particular part of the action selection would be done.
So yeah, so this is an implementation of different techniques that research papers have come out for. There's a lot of different approaches to doing this. Actually, I think, Rich, I'm actually going to point you to a blog post that explains it much better, and I just think it'll explain it much better than I can right now.
Fair enough. Can you post a link to your slides?
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Yeah.
I didn't have time to scan the. And the first link was your GitHub, right? I believe, which is very easy to find. Just GitHub Langchain.rb pops right up.
Right. Yeah. So this article, re-implementing Langchain in 100 lines of code, talks specifically about how the React agent is implemented.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate that. I look forward to reading that. Who else has a question? Please.
Do we just shout out our question?
Yeah, just jump right in. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little informal.
Sure. First of all, great presentation. Thanks very much. A couple questions. First is the LLM models. I guess are there any that's open source that's free, or are all of them paid?
Yeah. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I have a second question. Follow
up. So if we jump back to the vector search LLM matrix, so we do support local Llama, the Llama CPP port, which is whenever I run it on my machine, I don't have a cluster of servers GPUs provisioned. Whenever I run it on my kind of fully loaded M1, it's still quite slow.
Yeah, that was my second question. I noticed the speed. I guess the that's not control. Is that controlled by? I mean, some of the LLMs you basically have to use their APIs, which you pay for, so you don't have really have control over the speed of that. But what about like local Llama? Is that something you set up yourself as an open source, and then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I could send you a link to kind of the Llama CPP project and how to set up, and you can compile it for Apple kind of GPU, Apple Metal hardware, but it's still very slow, and I think obviously the space is moving very, very quickly. And there's a lot of hope that open source models will catch up to their commercial counterparts. And that's something that's something that I would very much love to see. I mean, even when we think about like testing these systems, right? Like running a test suite. So in the kind of traditional software engineering, right, you provide input X and you get input Y back, right, and you could test that. When you receive a natural language response back, it gets a lot more fuzzier, right? Because basically now you have to kind of check against semantic closeness. And we can't call Open API whenever we run a test suite, right? That would be a very expensive development lifecycle.
Right.
And I think once the open source LLMs catch up, we can kind of build better tooling. So I really hope that happens.
Sure, and I assume that the open source one is not as good as the paid ones currently.
Correct. Yeah.
And these, I guess, they get. So in terms of the models, do they get updated as frequently, or how does it work? You just look at if there's been any change in the GitHub, and then if there are changes, you then update yours?
So what we have is basically like wrappers for our models, right? So whenever the API specifications change, we do update our wrappers to ensure it still works. Yeah.
I see. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Andrei.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for the talk. That was really interesting. I had a question sort of about the practical considerations around code execution and like query generation. How are you thinking about mitigating like the risks of doing that in production? Is there a way around that, or is this mainly just like a experimental thing right now?
Yeah, so the agents are definitely experimental. I wish I had a better answer, similar to how we've always had SQL injections. Instead of a rogue user, right, rogue hacker, perhaps there's a rogue AI trying to attack your system, right? So before you execute some sort of a SQL query on the LLM's behalf, I would say sanitizing it is a good idea. Creating a separate database user with appropriate permissions is a good idea. So perhaps they can't execute any write queries. They can only read data and only from certain tables. And then you also asked about the code execution. So the code execution, I don't think it's a new problem. I think there's kind of ways to solve it, but basically you kind of again limit. You sanitize the code that you would execute on LLM's behalf, and also try to sandbox it as much as you can, so it doesn't have access to to a networking layer and calling into outside services.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I just want to follow up on Paul's question. Just so it sounds like, well, with OpenAI, the prompt injection is already like really bad. It sounds like it was when we start hooking up like real systems into it, it's gonna be even crazier. Is that that's the impression I'm getting? Is that about right?
So there's yeah, so the prompt injection is just kind of to summarize what it is. So prompt injection is constructing these prompts so that you trick the LLM to do something else than what was intended, right? So I've seen people. I remember seeing a tweet. Someone got the GitHub Copilot to send back the prompt, the original prompt. And it talks about, you're the code assist for engineers, and these are all the different things you have to follow. There could be sensitive data in the prompt, in the original prompt, in the instructions that that a user can get it to kind of echo it back. There's all kinds of tricks, like you send an LLM a request, and you ask it to ignore everything that's above the certain line, and it would just completely ignore the previously written instructions. I don't think anyone has come up with a really good solution. I've seen I've seen approaches where people use an LLM to then analyze the past tense prompt and see whether there's any sort of malicious intent before it gets executed by the main LLM. It seems very weird, and also still error prone. So I would say that currently it's all kinds of application hackery that's needed to do a proper prompt injection. I don't think anyone solved those concerns yet.
Yeah, so
But
I totally get it's hard because there's like whole class of, well, one is all new and this is all weird, but just thinking about what Paul says, like, hey, wait, or when what your answer, like, hey, wait, we're connecting our database to it, like, it's our, and then we talk about rights. I'm like, whoa, that is really bad, or that can get really bad when you mix in the prompt injection too, right? Imagine what drop table will look so basic compared to what you have hooked up there. So, well, okay, that's very enlightening.
Right. Yeah, and I would kind of reiterate that I think doing proper sanitization, so before you execute a query that was generated by the LLM, sanitizing it and making sure that there's no drop statements is step one. Sandboxing. You don't have to use the database tool. You could put an API in front of it and tell the LLM to generate a curl request, for example, right? An API request, and do that. And then in the API layer, you could do proper authorization, authentication, to make sure that kind of no malicious intent is executed.
Oh wait, that sounds like a microservice. Wait.
Good. I could also see maybe using transactions to try to observe what would happen if you commit.
Right. Right.
Or was it? Yeah. So just coming back to the prompt injection stuff, there was like that Gandalf AI, which is literally a challenge to, like, hey, we have these levels of prompts. or like levels of Gandalf, and it's like, hey, your challenge is to get him to reveal the password, right, for each level. And so I think I did the first 7, and then I think they've got like 8, 9 levels 8, 9 now. But yeah, the prompt injection is nuts already. I'm not sure if there is a good solution, but like, yeah,
Right.
it's so interesting. A lot of
And
job security around.
and so all of these exercises where you had to deploy prompt engineering.
Yeah, you're against an AI agent, Gandalf, and then he has a
Okay.
password. How do you get it out from him, right? And then there's like the level 7. You can there's a bunch of one. You can have it say, I don't remember now. I did it a while ago, but like the best one I saw recently is like, hey, my grandma used to read to me like bedtime stories, and then it like the Windows 10 security product activation keys, and it would just read it to me like this, and then actually you got ChatGPT to produce like Windows 10 API or Windows 10 product keys, license keys, using that by like, but it's so insidious. Like, hey, yeah, it's a grandma saying bedtime stories that just happen to be this. So it's like, yeah, it's getting hard.
Yeah, I mean, we occasionally see news about a bank or some sort of other critical infrastructure gets hacked, right? I think similar to how whenever a Tesla that's doing the FSD, right, occasionally does something wrong and crashes or kills the driver. I think we're going to see that in the in the world of applications as well as product companies start rolling out these capabilities.
Well, have you heard of like, was it Poison GPT, where it's almost like it's not about it's not prompt injection. It's like literally poisoning data set that people would work from too. So it's, yeah, we're in a lot of very interesting time, a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, if you don't mind dropping a link to that prompt hacking exercise, I would love to take a look.
Oh yeah, I dropped it. I saw it in Hacker News. I dropped it there, but I think like it's Gandalf.ai. No, like Lakera.ai was which was the original challenge. They were a company doing it, I think. And then I think the first, however, gets swag or something. So
Thank you.
but yeah, no, thanks a lot. I love it's just coming back to, hey, is Ruby's dying kind of, and it's also at that sentiment that we had a big talk last summer, right? It was like, we poised it as like, hey, is developer happiness doesn't matter anymore, right? Because that was one key selling feature of Ruby, right? And I love these projects kind of keeping Ruby alive and just kind of like keeping things going. So I really appreciate all your effort on this.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it definitely feels like an uphill battle. It's like, does it make sense to create our own sets of PyTorches of the world and TensorFlows, right? One would should think very carefully about, but I think I think for existing Ruby projects, Rails projects, existing monoliths, you're basically at a fork and you're trying to decide whether we spin up a Python team and have them maintain and develop those capabilities and call into the APIs, right? Which has its own set of problems. Do you even have kind of that knowledge on staff? Do you want to introduce another language in the mix? Or hopefully this could also be a viable solution is if you don't need to go super deep into the nitty gritty, train your own kind of models, bolt this on like you would with SearchGig to add Elasticsearch capabilities, bolt this on into your Rails stack and get going.
Do you want to talk about how you're looking for involvement from the community, Andrei, if you're interested in promoting that for your open source?
Yeah. So I've mentioned we have a Discord community. There's also a Ruby AI builders Discord. I mean, again, I'm very curious. Anyone that has a chance to try this out, pilot this out, I'm very curious about your feedback. I'm happy to help think through different approaches, architectures. Discuss adding in any features you might be missing. And also any ideas, contributions are definitely welcome. Maintaining this open source project is turning out to be extremely time intensive, and I think I would love kind of additional pairs of hands to do that.
Hey, wait, can't you just get some language models to hook it up so it kind of maintains itself-ish? Like, isn't that the dream? Like,
you mean can you get the tool to write itself?
yeah, because this morning there's a what was it?
The GPT engineer?
Yeah. That's the one. You just literally take the prompt and it's like, hey, and it'll create prompts and rank itself, and like it's 4 LLMs together, isn't it?
Right.
You just got to do it for open source software projects.
Yeah, and we can all just take a indefinite vacation. Let the software write itself.
It's also called Skynet, right? That's Skynet.rb. They should make a project. That's what you should call this project.
Andrei, would you take a stab at just maybe sharing your perspective on hallucinations? I am pretty new to the space, but I'm interested in that topic, how some LLMs, are better at not having them, and some seem to be worse. Do you have perspective or insight on this issue?
Yeah, when you first started that question, I thought you were going to ask me for my perspective on AGI, so I'm glad I get to answer an easier question. So I think obviously GPT-4 is extremely impressive. I think as these models get added to applications, I think people are going to be settling for more task-specific models, because you don't always need a general purpose model to do certain tasks, whether it's summarization or kind of like classical like classification tasks. So I think, and some of the LLM providers are already doing that. They're creating APIs that are very task specific. So whether it's code interpretation or, again, summarization tasks or classification tasks. So I'm not sure that there's just going to be one super powerful general purpose model that we're all going to be using. I think it's going to be easier to opt out for task specific models.
and I don't know where I heard this, but like all of the free data that's been out there for a long time, I understand that places like Reddit and Stack Overflow are going to start charging people that are scraping their data, because all of these LLMs have been built with all this free data, and that whole poisoning of the data space problem, it seems like there's going to be like a big, probably use case for people just having their own proprietary data, which I guess is a variation on what you just said. And also, it seems like there might be an interesting need developing out there for data validation, verification in the context of training data, just like we now one of the big things that's been going on over the last few years is being able to how do we validate users, how do we know a person is really who they say they are, that type of thing. I wonder how we're going to do that with data, since if we're building an AI world based on data, how are we going to know whether the data is any good?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I spoke to a New York City startup a couple months ago, and they have a marketing tool where basically as a marketer you can ask it to research a topic and create blog posts off of it, and you kind of feed it your brand assets, your mission statement, your vision, etc., and it generates a lot of marketing content that's in line with your company. And I thought to myself, well, wait a second. Once every single marketing professional is using that tool, and we're just flooding the internet with all this like BS marketing copy, right? Like, what is internet gonna look like? And I think to some extent it will actually devalue a lot of his content. When it's so common and so similar sounding, I think people are just gonna stop consuming it. I mean, how often do you read some companies blog and care to read what they have to say about a certain topic? Like, very rarely. A lot of it is kind of redundant. But yeah, in order to, how do you make sure that the data we use to train these models is quality data? There's a lot there's a lot of like open source data sets that have been vetted and serve as a good blueprint into training models. But in terms of continuous training, I'm not sure I have a good answer. And especially when we start continuously, iteratively training our models on users' data from ongoing interactions. Yeah, it just feels like we'll definitely feed these LLMs a poisonous pill. Yeah, I'm curious if anyone else has any thoughts on this.
I have one thought, and yeah, you're definitely right. It's because we trained it on like literally clean data or just human only data, and then at some point this stuff comes in and it becomes like this feedback loop, right? Because we're training it on stuff that is freely available, but now we have a tool out there, so that you have a point in time moving forward where content moving forward can or cannot be from the from the tool. And probably the best way to say is kind of even as I use ChatGPT myself at the API level, I'm kind of like, no, don't use the new stuff, just use the checkpointed stuff. right? Just do everything from 2021 March or something like that, and just use that instead of the newer one. And you probably don't also want the newer one too, because it's all sanitized as well. And you can only just want like clean, raw, brutally honest one instead of the, completely sanitized one that is out there. So that's probably like one way of solving that. You just kind of knowing which data set you're using too, right? And then as we move forward, yeah, you really have to step up your critical thinking as well. Like, right, know where your boundaries of your knowledge info is, because what usually gets everyone into a lot of trouble is when you're outside your boundaries and you're completely just trusting the whim of the tool to tell you. Probably similar to Google Maps, right? Who knows how to read a map anymore, right? After a phone, like seriously, that's just a complete paradigm shift. If you were traveling somewhere without a phone, you'd just be a complete loser, right? This is just it's such a paradigm shift now. But we trust the phone so much, and it's because you hear about people just driving off cliffs or into rivers and stuff, and it's not that they're idiots or something. It's just because they're totally they're completely dependent on the tool, and they're out of their comfort zone, right? Which is why they're trusting it. And I think the same thing, but it's just in your mind now. And I think that's where it gets really interesting. And maybe there's something around, like, maybe call it evolution, right? People that actually have good critical thinking skills and know where the boundaries are, and when they're out of their boundaries, know who to ask, right? For that, hey, is this right or not? Or either maybe they get lucky. So I don't know. Those are my two thoughts.
It's a fascinating issue because if you look at our current society, we have arguments about basic truth on a scientific level. And I know it's political, and I'm not trying to make a political statement here at all, but I'm just, there's some, you could perhaps call it dysfunction in that space. So it is an interesting problem. I want to throw another question out there, and just at the risk of and please interrupt me if someone else wants to jump in. But one of the things that crosses my mind as we evolve into an AI-centric world is how do we fit in as humans? Like, if you look at, and I'm not let me make it more simple. If you start to look at AI as produces poetry or art, writes code better than maybe some of the best people that write code, so forth and so on. How does it make anyone feel? I mean, I just speaking personally, I find that future a little challenging, because it's like you could never compete with an LLM, or an LLM with well articulated, validated data that was speaking truth. There's no human that could ever compete with that. Does that type of question of rattle around in anyone else's thinking, or is that am I just being a paranoid fool about a Luddite, an AI Luddite or something, Luddite?
I have a response to this. I think about it a lot. I look at it as more of like lowering the barriers to the creativity. So like the advancements that Apple has made on like the iPhone camera and the AI assisted enhancement of those photos hasn't put photographers out of work, but like the very best photographers, it's made them be able to focus more on the things that make that art good, of subject selection, composition, maybe less composition even, but more of like, what are you trying to say with the art? And also like brought the floor up of like anybody without those technical chops can now make something that looks pretty good. Like I can actually take a photo that looks like something I'd want to share with somebody. and so, I see it kind of becoming more of, taking away those things that you might need to learn to do that are keeping other people out, the same way that, if you look for software engineering, right? Like as we've progressed from writing assembly or binary to like where we are now at these higher level languages, more and more people have been able to enter the field that that couldn't before, maybe were put off by some of those things. And so, really, maybe this is biased, but I see it as kind of really getting into the for software engineering, getting into the core of being able to describe what you want the product or software to do, and the details of like learning all of the ins and outs of like JavaScript don't become as important anymore. And it's more of like, how clear in your thinking are you able to be, and the AI can take care of the other parts for you.
Well, I do like that. I like the idea of using your forthcoming, offerings to have that very exercise. It's curious to me though, at what point the AI evolves, like where it's doing that too. So it's a confusing set of, thoughts, to say the least, for me. It's like, but I totally hear what you're saying, and I think that's a great, that would be great, for us to be in that position that you described.
So I'm also wondering if it becomes more of a tolerance for low quality work because it can be done faster and easier. Oh my God, that was not a popular comment.
Well, it does. I mean, I'm not sure precisely what you mean, but when you say lower quality work, I mean, essentially,
Okay,
if you have a tool that can tell you the right way to do something, and all you have to do is guide it in the way Scott suggests, then as in a partnership, you can't really make low quality anymore, I guess.
No, what I think what I'm more getting at is like a little bit of not our level, but sort of the boss above us decides that. I mean, this is very much the classic scenario of like, I don't need you. I can do this on my own. I'll just get a bot who does it. And it doesn't have to be that fancy. It just needs to get the core business done. If that makes sense. Like all the features that you could add may not be as important.
I see. I got you.
As long as we can get what's the core thing that we need to do? We need to get A, B, C set from database onto display for screen for someone who logs in properly. We don't care that much about that the UI looks shiny, polished things, that kind of stuff. Just the core business is done, and sort of it moves on to that. But then again, thinking about that and looking at how things evolve over time is, I think things comes and go. So probably there is going to be that way of a lot of simplification. Then as you guys said earlier about that gets, everyone does it, then the only way to stand out is to have someone who can actually do the detailed work. And then we're, either that forces the AI to be able to do that, or then sort of there's more need for real human programmers who can detailed work with these tools to do it.
It's a fascinating question. I mean, one of Andrei's slides, I think, kind of speaks to this a little bit. I don't know how you phrased it, Andrei. I think you called it AI engineering or something like that. But I think that's what you're talking about, like the person who's going to be shepherding the AI to do to create.
Yeah. I mean, I that's where I presume this whole thing is going. Like, we have to know code, but there's going to be less of us doing. We're going to make sure that does this work? Does all the pieces work? A larger understanding of basically we're moved up as managers while the tools do the real work.
I recall seeing a tweet. Someone posted that the idea of having software engineering jobs fully automated out stands on the premise of having the client be able to explain exactly what they want built. And anyone that's ever worked in consulting knows very well that it's a large, a challenging part of a job is actually extracting out their requirements, right? But the rebuttal to that is that well, you can iterate much faster. So perhaps you can't explain the application in natural language. Perhaps you can't explain the exact application you want built the first time around, right? But you get almost instant feedback. You can have that application built in 5 minutes. So the iteration loops are much faster. So eventually you will get there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't.
Yeah. So do you spend 2 hours in a requirements gathering session with an engineer, or do you just or do you spend 1 hour with an LLM playing around?
Yeah.
It's going to change everything. I mean, we just, in ways that I don't think we can even imagine. Scott, I see all those instruments in the background, and the stuff that's happening in AI and music. I mean, it's just wild. Like being able to imitate a singer and all that stuff. I'm just, since you're right in the thick of this with creating, software to replace us. I wonder, how you think about it in terms of like the music side of it, since you're
I love it. I mean, like, to go back to what I was saying around like photography and like lowering the barriers, if you've got an idea for a song, you're not going to be held back by your ability to sing, to actually play an instrument, to do anything. You can actually go into the more of the core of, is this good? Right? There was actually an Ira Glass interview where he talks about like creativity and like sticking through. I forget what he calls it, but like when you get into some creative field, you get into it because of your taste, and you want to express your taste. But when you start, you suck, and your taste like is very developed, and you can tell that you suck and what you're putting out sucks. But like you have to get through that part where you're bad to reach your taste. And I see this as like compressing that. Like if you have good taste, being able to kind of not have to go through those years of just being bad at it and suffering through and putting out stuff that is embarrassing, right? So I think that part's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah, no, that totally resonates. It's interesting. My girlfriend's son is a musician, and he really likes performing alone and doing all the parts himself. And just, this is a personal perspective, because I grew up in a family that was very musical, and it was all about performing together with other humans. And so there's that dynamic as well, where you can do all this stuff yourself. You can do all the instruments, but I don't know, it's a little far afield from this conversation. But I think the thing that's interesting to me is that the societal changes that are going to come about, over the next 5-10 years. I mean, I think they're going to be immense, and just really hard to predict, especially when you talk about economic, secular changes in the economies because of the way jobs pay or what jobs are available. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I guess we've gone over time, and if there are no more questions, we'll quickly open up the conversation for for employment opportunities, if people want to shop their resumes or their open positions. Does anyone else have any more questions for Andrei or for discussion? Okay, and I'm going to stop the recording here, and